Hello and welcome, everybody, to today's episode of the Angelic Footprints podcast. We have another very special guest with us today. His name is Tom Snow. Now, Tom tells me that he is not part of any organized religion or denomination. He is a Jewish Christian. He believes that there is one God who created all and are all equal in God's creation. There's only one true church, which is the body of Christ, of which all true believers are a part. Tom believes in God's light that dispels darkness and binarily separates truth from lies. That's a very interesting bio, Tom, that you've got. I'm really interested to hear what you say about angels and how they've had a part in your life. And I know that you are still learning. You're 55. In the 55 years, your goal is to share what you've learned along the way. This is going to be an amazing conversation. Tom, please tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, glad to. Thank you for having me. Um, well, I met the Lord in 1970. I was a teenager dying of cancer. Long story there. Won't take the time today because that'd take up the whole podcast. But my mother had died from cancer the year before. I was dying of cancer. God miraculously saves me, heals me. I mean, miraculous healing. I had a tumor inside of me that grew from the size of a walnut, hard as a rock, to larger than a football. And on the day the Lord healed me, when I was riding home on my motorcycle from a meeting after meeting him and walking with him for a bit at that point and talking to him because we all can hear the still, small, quiet voice of the Lord asked me and said, do you see in the scripture in Isaiah where I said, by his stripes we are healed? I said, yes. He said, do you see in First Peter where I said, by his wounds you were healed? I said, yes. R is looking present to the future. Were was looking back. And the Lord spoke. I mean, we all can have the still, small, quiet voice. So those, if we're believers and we have the peace of Christ ruling in our heart. And the Lord said, well, Isaiah was looking to the cross, forward to the cross. Peter was looking back to the cross. He says, I completed everything at the cross. He says, would you like that healing? This is in the early charismatic days. We're seeing miracles all over the place. And I was like nonchalant because I'd been dying of cancer and I now knew the Lord and I wasn't scared to death. I was actually ready to go home to be with the Lord, with Papa God, because he was so wonderful. His love was so great. And I just didn't care I was dying. I was scared before I met the Lord. And so, but I said, yeah, sure, whatever, nonchalant. And the Lord, in that moment, I knew something changed. And within 24 hours, the rock hard tumor that had grown to larger than a football in my abdomen melted, dissipated, and was gone. So that's the beginning of my story.
Wow. So did you have like a scan or something like that where they were able to actually see it, or did you just feel the tumor inside of you?
Well, I felt the tumor inside of me. See, this is where it gets into a long story. I don't want to take a lot of time. It's in the first book that I tell the detail, but I'll just say this. I was doing experiments in the 60s as a teenager with asbestos dust, trying to create an invention to help people. My mother gets sick. Asbestos, can cause cancer. And she had died of cancer, riddled with cancer. I then got cancer. I felt the guilt of the world that it was my fault that I had caused my mother's death. I was just a dumb teenager, but that doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so I had the guilt of the world. So a month after she died, I felt the rock hard tumor the size of a walnut in my gut. And I wouldn't tell anybody because I deserved to die. That's what I felt like. The guilt was so monstrous in me. I deserved to die. And
Yeah.
so, so I wouldn't tell anybody. A lot of story in there that goes into it. It ends up that to get my motorcycle when I turned 16, 1970. I had to talk my father into buying it. I had to get a job to do that. I had to get a food handler's permit to do that in the city I lived in. You have to go to the county clinic, get an x-ray and a blood test. I knew at that point the x-ray is going to show this monster tumor. The blood test, if they go deep enough, will show cancer coursing through my veins. And I didn't want to tell anybody because I didn't deserve to live, but I wanted a motorcycle because I thought I'd feel free with the wind blowing in my face. So I thought, well, maybe my father was a hard rock, 1970, didn't show love. My mother's the only one in the family showed love. And so I thought, well, my secret will be out, but maybe my father, he's not one to actually put an arm around me, but maybe he could figuratively reach out and put an arm around me. So I thought, well, my secret will be out, but I want that motorcycle. Well, it ends
Mm.
up, long story short, when he found out from the tests that he hid it from me, the stories tell the whole thing in detail in the book, but I'm not going to take the time here. And I'm thinking, well, I've known for 6 months while I'm dying, and he's just lost his wife, my mother, 6 months prior. He's just probably trying to wrap his head around it. So I just kind of gave him some space. The next week I come home and he has two insurance agents in the living room and he takes out a life insurance policy on me. And I think, what
Oh,
in the world? What in the heck are you doing? Like, I wanted you to maybe comfort me. Now you're going to take a life insurance policy on me. And I'm going, well, and me, the youngest of three boys, not my two older brothers, just me. And I mean, we're of Jewish lineage. And by that point, my mother and father had pretended to be Christians to avoid persecution. There's a whole history of persecution in our family and murder and all kinds of terrible. That'll be in another book. So,
okay. Hold on a sec. Let me stop you right there for a sec, Tom. It's a fabulous story, and I want our listeners to definitely tune into your book. And if they're interested, one of the things I'm very conscious of is that there will be listeners out here going, no, I'm not into the whole Christian, Jewish, anything. I'm spiritual. I don't want anything to do with religion whatsoever. So
mhm.
let's focus on the part that I know that is going to interest our listeners even more than just that story because it's so inspirational. The fact that perhaps you were thought that you were meant to die and then you haven't. You're still here. You're still sending that beautiful message through in your story. But let's talk about angels for a moment. You said you've got quite a few angel stories. Let's share some of those for our listeners, please. Can you give us maybe one or two telling about those experiences?
Okay. Well, I'd love to share on that. I've got half a dozen stories ready to tell. We'll start with just a couple. Um, well, in the early 70s, as I say, it was the charismatic move, and there was a lot of miracles. And I had just come from a place of death to now life and excitement. And so I wanted to serve the living God. And I back in the day, we had an old VW van, my brother and I, and it was given to him, then he gave it to me. And neither of us could pay for anything to keep it up. We couldn't even pay for gas. And it was in bad shape. And uh, like the brakes were no good. The engine, I mean, it literally back in that day, if we didn't stop and pray and wait for before we started it, it wouldn't start. It would just wear the
Oh,
battery
goodness.
out. And so, and we sometimes we had no gas, so we'd sit there and pray, and we'd literally watch the gas gauge rise from empty to a quarter tank. I don't know how you explain that except a miracle. So this is that was my only means of transportation. And so I was working with the youth group in our church, and we one Saturday night we had what was called the Christian Free Drive-In in our city, Columbus, Ohio. And every Saturday night they'd give, free movies. And so I took the van, went over to picked up the youth group at the church, They all piled into the van, and they knew the routine. You had to pray to start, you had to pray to stop, and that's it. If you didn't, it wasn't gonna start, and if you didn't, it wasn't gonna stop. And so, I mean, that's how bad the brakes were, but couldn't afford to fix it. I wouldn't drive that nowadays, but obviously I was 16 and it is what it is. And,
Well, when you're 16, you're allowed to be a little bit crazy, right?
you're allowed to be, and I was. And so we loaded the whole van packed full of the youth group. I mean, far more than that van should fit, probably 20 people in a VW van. Only sits 6 or 7. And, so we prayed, we took off. We're driving down the interstate. We get off the interstate, and as we're getting off the interstate, this particular exit, instead of having like a roundabout circle that would help like slow us down because, normally you'd like be able to like go on the curve and it's going uphill and it'd slow down. I'm used to using that as part of my braking system. This one just went the from the freeway right into a city street.
Oh,
And all of a sudden, as soon as we get off, I see traffic backed up, like dead stop for quite a ways. And I'm like, I told everybody, pray, because there's no way in the world we could stop in time. And so I stood out of my seat. If you know an old VW van, they had a flat nose, not just a piece of sheet metal. And the brakes were, I mean, literally I was standing out of my seat when the brakes were totally down to the floorboard, and it wasn't slowing down, and it wasn't gonna stop in time. And I'm, like, in slow motion watching this thing just coming up to the station wagon that was ahead of us with the family in it, and I'm like, "Oh, man, we're gonna crash." And seconds later, bang, crash. And I'm like, "Oh my god, I hope I didn't hurt them," everybody was okay in our van. I mean, maybe I was down to 35 mile an hour at that point, but it was coming off, the freeway speeds. And it's like, I'm just feeling awful. And the strangest things happened. First of all, like I'm on, the front of this VW van. You have no hood in front of you, so I have a perfect view right into the station wagon. And it was a mother, father, and some kids, and they didn't look shook up. As a matter of fact, they just slowly turned their heads like maybe they heard a crash somewhere back in the distance. And I'm thinking, "That's strange." And so I'm just thinking, "Well, they're gonna call the cops. We're gonna have to deal with this, I hope." And finally, the light changes, and as it changes, all the cars ahead, I'm thinking, "Well, they'll just pull over, and we're gonna have to pull over and call the police." And as the cars ahead pulled ahead, this station wagon just took off normal, following the cars, and I'm in shock, staring, going, "What?" And I'm looking at the rear bumper, and there's not a scratch on it. Not a scratch, not a dent in their car at all. And I'm like, "What?" And so I pulled the van over to the side so everybody else could go on, got out, and the front of the van was smashed in, totaled, completely destroyed in the shape of a large body. And in that moment, we understood that our guardian angel had stood between the station wagon and us and left. And as I say, he left a big impression on us that day as he left that impression on the van.
oh, I get the goosebumps as you're telling that story. That is just so amazing. And I can relate to that, having had my own experience with a car and me being a pedestrian and not getting hurt. So I can totally relate to this story. It's just amazing. Oh, Tom, I don't even know how to move on from that. But what did you think after that? You knew it was your guardian angel, so life went on as normal?
Well, I mean, we all were astounded. I mean, it changes your life, when you have interactions with angels. Before I had come to the Lord, I had interactions where, as a teenager, when I was going through all this sickness and my father with all the insurance policy and going through guilt and hate and everything else, I had become a teenage alcoholic, like to drown my sorrows. I would drink a fifth of whiskey in 2 hours and then try to drive home on my motorcycle. And I literally, and this isn't one of the stories, but it's just part of the angels, is I would wake up, I would be in the right lane of a 4-lane highway. Ours is, we drive on the right side and you drive on the
You
left
do?
side, right?
Yes.
But you can imagine, I was in the furthest lane on the side I'm allowed to drive in, and I would wake up blacked out, drifted across 4 lanes, almost into the ditch on the other side, to then just get shoved all the way back 4 lanes over to the furthest on my side, to then wake up 4 lanes over, ready to go in the ditch and push back. So my first interaction with angels were them taking bruises for me so that I wouldn't die on my motorcycle. So I love it that God puts angels in place to protect us as believers. And, uh, you know, so when the guardian angel's there and blocks that van, you know, yeah, I had to repair the van, but you know what? It was amazing. It was amazing to know the image of that figure of a man was in the imprint of the whole front of the van.
Well, definitely sounds like you had some angelic protection on that day and on many other occasions as well, like with driving your motorbike. And it sounds like you're definitely meant to be around for a higher purpose. You said you also had some other stories. Would you like to share another one with us, please? Because I know our listeners, even though they may not, totally resonate with God, I'm listening to your stories going, but they're angels. And at the end of the day, the word angel means messenger of God. So this is
Mhm.
so relevant. Thank you, Tom. What's another story for us, please?
Well, I've had interactions with messenger angels probably 3 or 4 times that I know of through my years, through 55 years of walking with the Lord. Um, my the first all the times until this last one were always when I was in a bad place, like dealing with something, maybe it was upsetness with my wife and dealing with children and dealing with things. And God would send a messenger up and deliver a word and look just like what the Bible says, we'll entertain angels unaware, right?
Right.
And so they'll look just like a human. And in the moment you're talking to them, there's some feeling inside of you. There's something that says, this is not your regular human. It looked like an old bum that night who was talking to me. I'm getting out of the car to go to the ATM and get some cash out. Just had a big argument with the wife, and the kids are in the car. And I'm walking up to the ATM, and this guy, this old bum says, you shouldn't be doing that, right? And I'm just hearing it, and I'm just like realizing I had entered into this anger. My wife had pushed me too far. We had a bad dynamic in that day. And so, and in the moment he said that, you look toward, and this is an old bum who couldn't move faster than anything. You look, I stand outside the car, look at the bank teller portal, look back, and he's disappeared.
Yeah.
I've had so many times where I was delivered those messages when I was in a not a great place, and then you just see them and they're disappeared a second later. It's not physically possible, but they just, the Bible tells us we entertain angels unaware. Well, that means they're going to take on human form and they're going to deliver the word that we're to hear in that moment. I'm going to tell you about a fun one that is a positive one that just happened not long ago. Most of those were years ago, but this one just happened recently. I was at a Sam's Club and getting gas, filling up, and I just filled up my car, and when I was done, it's, bright, beautiful day, and, I looked across, or this really feeble little old lady, had to look 85 plus, really feeble, on the other side of the pump said, "Sir, could you help me?" And I said, "Sure." So I walked across through the pump, and she said, "I just got my new Sam's gas card, and I just don't know how to use it right, and could you help me?" And I'm like, and, innocent enough, 85-year-old woman, I don't think she's gonna mug me. And, and I'm a big boy, so I'm not really afraid of being mugged too much. Um, and so, but as I looked into her eyes, and I all of a sudden sensed the presence of God, and I could see the beauty of the Father just glowing through her eyes. And I looked at her eyes, and she looked at me, and in that moment, I knew she was one of my guardian angels. I knew it. And as I looked back, I smiled. In my smile was, "I know who you are." And
Yeah.
she just smiled right back, like, "We know each other." She's been around for a lot of years. And so I helped her with her Sam's transaction. That was just a ploy, I'm sure, but I helped her with the transaction, and she got the gas nozzle, put it in her big SUV, and there was nobody in the SUV, just she was there, and she put it in, started to fill the gas. I walked to the other side, got in the car, just enjoying the moment that, I'd just seen one of my guardians, and she was so sweet. The presence of God was amazing. The peace of God was amazing. And so as I got in the car, I looked back and I saw her there, and I take off. And 3 seconds later, I look back and she's disappeared. And the gas nozzle is still in the SUV. There's nobody in the SUV. And I drove around the SUV just to see if she was anywhere around there. No, she had disappeared. And unless this little 85-year-old frail woman ran like a gold medal sprinter across the empty Sam's parking lot and disappeared that way, she was my angel for the day.
Yeah. And from so many of my guests, how many times I've heard they say angels appear in whatever form that you need to hear and what message you need to hear at that particular point. And you've just given us some beautiful, beautiful examples of that. Tom, normally at this point of the show, I would ask you, how has that influenced your life? But I'm going to change the question a little bit for you. How would you say all of these experiences have meant that you lead your life now? How has that had an impact on the way you look at life?
Well, that's a good question. I I believe in the angelic beings. Uh, I believe that there's two sources of power. There's God and there's the evil side,
Mhm.
the devil and his fallen angels. We call them the demons. And I believe there's battles going on all the time in a realm we can't see behind us of angels and demons. And it's changed me to know that I love to see God's protection, that I believe that his protection is around us, and he uses his angels as ministers or those who implement that protection. Um, can I throw in another little quick story, super quick one?
A
When my
super quick
daughter
one. Yeah.
Super quick one. My daughter, when she's 12 now. When she was 2 and just learning to be potty trained, uh, she went into the half bath, and I, like, leave the door open. I'm gonna be over in the living room. Just, she's learning potty training. And so she goes in there, and then all of a sudden, a few seconds later, hear a tremendous crash. And I go running in, and this 4-foot tall medicine cabinet was laying on the ground, far away from where she's laying on the ground. She's like laying there, and like a curious little 2-year-old, she decided to climb up on that cabinet, and the whole thing came crashing down. And I said, "Juliet, are you okay? What's wrong? What happened?" She goes, "I'm okay, but the big man, he pushed that cabinet away from me."
How fantastic is that? So, not only have you had angels protecting your own life, but your daughter Juliet has had the benefit of that as well. That is an amazing story, and how she obviously told that so frankly and was able to tell you, oh, the big man pushed that away, obviously being her angel. I love the way children are so open to the other world, to the other side, and how they can relate things like that to you. I absolutely love that. Tom, would you like to share with our listeners perhaps a little bit more about your books and anything that you've got coming up where maybe they can tune into you and how they can get in touch with you if they might have questions or potentially even want to work with you?
Sure. I'll be glad to talk about it. And hopefully you will be putting in the description the links to all these things.
I will.
Um, Basically, I'm semi retired now. I owned my own software development business for 45 years, but now I'm semi retired writing books. I never thought I'd be writing books, but it's like I started my first one, actually started it over 40 years ago. It's on spiritual warfare, walking with the Lord in spiritual warfare. And then the Lord had me set it down. And it wasn't until 2 years ago when I had congestive heart failure that the Lord said, pick it up. And you can read the description at Amazon and you'll get a good laugh. But anyway, it's called The Daily Stand. And so in that book, I actually have one whole chapter on angels, and I cover some of these same stories and some others that, so, and I thought as I'm writing this book, well, that's a one and done. I'm not a writer. You know what I'm saying? Before I had that book done, I had 12 more inside of me. So now I've finished the second one. I'm working on number 3 and 4 at the same time. Um, the second one's called Set the Captives Free. And it has to do a lot with false belief systems and a lot of church hurt and leadership hurt and abuse in the church and why a lot of people left the church because of all the abuse. And it deals with how to get through that and to wrap your head around what are the real things, what's behind it, and then how to move on. And so both those books, you'll have in the links. You can find those books and more information about the others coming up at my website's called justtobeclear.com, and it's the number 2. So just number 2, beclear.com. It'll tell you about the first 2 books. It'll tell you about, some preview or little information on next books. But seems like that's my new thing now is writing books and being on podcasts. So you can contact me through the website. There's a contact portal. There's also, if you get on my Substack, where you can read posts and read some of the, see some podcasts, some on angels. And that's just to be clear, one.substack.com. But you'll have that, I'm sure, in the description. So
Yeah.
you can contact through there too.
Tom, it sounds like God has more plans for you still. And there's that old saying, God laughs at he who makes plans. So I'm sure that there is a divine purpose in some of these books that you've still got coming out. For all our listeners, if you would like to get in touch with Tom, it sounds like he's got some fascinating stories and some wonderful messages that he might be able to impart with you. And do get in touch with him if there's something that you feel might help you in terms of moving your life forward. Tom might have some wonderful suggestions for you. Tom, are there any last thoughts that you would like to share before we finish our show for today?
Well, one thing is, I forgot to mention both books are on 99 cent on ebook on most major platforms, Amazon and Apple and others, just for the month of August because it's kind of celebrating my second book coming out. So both of them are 99 cents for this month. Um, there are some free giveaway things. You can find that off on the site on the second book. So if you're interested in getting some information on that, um, in terms of just in general, I know there's a lot of people who come from different angles and beliefs. And, but I would say that I feel very blessed that in the last 55 years, I've gotten to walk with the true and living God. And it hasn't all been easy, hasn't been fun. Usually it's hard. Um, I say walking with the Lord is simple, it's just not easy. And so there's a lot of things, but living with the true and living God and having his miraculous power around and having his angels around is worth its weight in gold.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. So, for all our listeners, if you feel the presence of your angels, or even if you call it spirit, God, the universe, whatever name that you want to give to the divine, it is a wonderful feeling if you would like to pursue that. And I'm sure Tom can give you some guidance on that as well. Tom, it's been such a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. To all our listeners, if you enjoyed the show, I would absolutely love you to connect with 3 people and share with them the information about the show. If you enjoyed the show and found it beneficial, please also consider leaving a 5-star review on the platform where you are listening. In the meantime, blessings, and may your life be filled with hope and inspiration. No. And we are back with Tom Snow, and we are in the sacred space. We've got some wonderful additional stories that Tom is going to share with us. He happened to mention he's got a story about a cat. Now, me being a huge cat lover, and guess what? This cat's name is Grayson, and I happen to have a cat called Grace. So I said to Tom, we so need to hear this story. And love him or hate him, he's also got a story about Donald Trump. Tom, the floor is all yours. Please share your wonderful stories with our sacred space listeners.
Okay, I will. I'm going to save the cat one for last because everybody loves animals. Uh, but starting with Trump. Now, as you said, love him or hate him, I've been pro Trump for a long time, but as I just told you, I think he is bombastic. He can be rude. He calls people names. I mean, I think that that's uncalled for. And I think he gets criticism for that. And for that, he probably deserves. But I do think God called him for a purpose. And this is about the assassination attempt in July of 24, just a little over a year ago. And normally I would have watched Trump rallies, prior years, but in 24, I'd kind of seen him all, heard everything he had to say over and over. So, I just wasn't watching him. But I had this bad feeling inside of me for the whole of 24 that there was going to be an assassination attempt. Well, on that day in July, like I said, I hadn't been watching rallies, but that day felt like I needed to watch it. And I was watching it live and on TV. And as I'm watching it, and he's standing on the podium, and as he's there, in my mind's eye, I couldn't see him physically. I saw 2 large guardian angels on either side of him. And I was just praying, just having this bad feeling about what I had felt for the whole year of 24. And of course, the shot rings out.
Yeah.
And it is known that if he was just couple centimeters one way or the other, he was dead. I mean, it may have been millimeters. And and I saw the first angel and he stopped Trump's head from moving. Like Trump was turning to go show his big poster that he loves to always talk about. And he was turning, and all of a sudden his head just stopped, like he couldn't move it further. The shot rings out, goes through his ear, As I say, it could have been just a centimeter or more, one way or the other, he'd be dead. And then all of a sudden, I saw the second angel shoving down, like so hard you wouldn't believe it. And you go, Tom, you're just like making stuff up. You're probably just seeing stuff in your mind. Well, could be, except for some reason, his head stopped when he was trying to turn it. And when he got shoved down, everybody thinks, well, he ducked down behind the podium, like most people would, right? You're getting fired at, you jump down behind the podium. Well,
As you
he was
would.
shoved down so hard, and I don't know if this is all public knowledge, but it is, it's out there, is that he was shoved down so hard that his shoes flew off of him 20 feet behind him. Now, I want to ask you, if you or I were jumping down behind a podium, are our shoes going to fall off? And if they did, would they be further than a foot away from us? They were
I
like they
wouldn't
were
think.
blowing off his feet 20 feet away. When he
Yeah.
stood up, he talked to his Secret Service agents and he said, "Go get my shoes." He wasn't going to leave without them. They were 20 feet behind him. Gee, I wonder if somebody bigger than us was stopping him, shoving him down. I believe saw what I saw. Now, you don't have to love him. You don't have to hate him. As I said, I think sometimes he's so bombastic, he can drive anybody crazy. But I do think God called him for a purpose, and God saved him that day. So he has two big
It's
guardians right around.
It certainly sounds like it, doesn't it? I mean, that's quite an extraordinary story. And Tom, how lucky are you to have been able to be a part of that, to see that? Maybe not so much of the experience, like who wants to see an assassination, but the fact that you saw the angels giving him that protection. And as you say, love him or hate him. I mean, you don't go out and set out in your heart to say, I want somebody dead, right? Even if you
Right.
don't like that particular person. So, what an amazing story. Tom, would you like to tell us the story about the cat?
Sure. Let me tell you about Grayson. This is a fun one. So this was just not long ago, and my next door neighbor, Jack, and his wife, Kim, they're good believers, good people. And Jack calls me, texts me on early on a Saturday morning, and he goes, Tom, it's 6 this morning. They were pet sitting a cat, nice gray, beautiful cat. His name's Grayson. You'll see it on my Substack page. You can see the whole story, get the picture actually of Grayson. And they were doing that for a friend and, didn't live close by. He was letting his dogs out, and the cat ran out at 6 a.m. when they ran out into the yard. Well, the cat doesn't know the neighborhood, right? And that
Mhm.
wasn't a good thing. So him and his wife are frantically looking around the yard. Nope, he got out of the fence. It's a wood fence. You can get through the slats, if you're a cat. And they drove around the neighborhood and they're looking all over the place. And his wife is frantic. I mean, you know, and so, I mean, she's just like ready to go crazy that they lost this cat and she loves her animals like many do. And she's like, and so Jack texts me and he goes, pray, pray that we can find Grayson because Kim's going to go crazy. And like Jack wasn't happy. And so I told him, I said, I will pray. And I will pray that the Lord send his angels, his guardians, to go out and go find the cat, because we'll find out if God likes cats just like he loves humans and loves animals. And so I said, I'll pray that the Lord sends his angels and will help you. And through the whole day, I don't hear back from Jack, but every time through the day, I'm praying and asking the Lord to help find Grayson and to send his angels to help. And while I was praying, I felt like the Lord said, I'll have the angels. Oh, I forgot to say one thing. I told Jack, I said, I'll ask that the Lord personally return Grayson to you by the angels. And so as I was praying, I felt like the Lord said he would have the angels return Grayson to them at 9 p.m. And I didn't tell Jack that because when you get a thought in your brain, doesn't mean you always hear right, right? Like, I
True.
think I heard right. I'm not going to stake my life on it, you know? So I'm just praying. And all through the day, every time I prayed, I felt like the Lord was saying, I'll have the angels returning at Grayson at 9 o'clock. And so 9 o'clock came and went, and I didn't hear anything from Jack. And I'm thinking, well, guess I didn't hear right. At 9:23, I get a text from Jack, and he goes, yeah, he says his daughter, Eliza, who was 20, almost 21, was in her room. And at 9 o'clock, just right at 9 o'clock, all of a sudden, Grayson appeared in the room from nowhere. She had been sitting in that room doing whatever for hours. And how did Grayson get in? How did Grayson get back in the house when Grayson was gone? How did Grayson find his way back from a neighborhood that he doesn't know? How did he get in the house? How did he appear in her room? Not, and her room's up on the second floor, second story. How did he appear there? He wasn't hiding under her bed because Jack saw him go out the back door.
Yeah.
And so the Lord returned Grayson at 9 p.m. that night and through the angels.
That is such a beautiful story. Actually, I have a very similar story myself with my cat Chester, who went missing. And it did take 4 days for him to come back and get returned to me, but he came back and he was safe. And I was ever so grateful. And trust me, I was praying and asking the angels to bring him back. And I know what that feeling is like. I was absolutely distraught. I was beside myself. And because I'm a very big cat person, I love my animals, and I know how upsetting it can be when something happens to them. And I'm so glad that Grayson did come back. And thank you for sharing all of your beautiful stories and how the angels and how spirit, God, the universe, whichever word that you like to use, can intervene and help bring our loved ones to safety and help us in our lives. Thank you so much for being here, Tom. It's been such a pleasure. I wish you all the very best going forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.